Good morning, everybody. And first of all, I may say that education definitely is a very, very serious topic, but we can still have fun. So I don't think we need to be very stiff. All of us sitting here, we can be very relaxed and do that. And just a small correction: I'm not the chairman of Pathway School. That's Mr. Pramod Jain, my father. I'm one of the co-founders, and that's what I am. So just starting with the talk. So the topic today, or the theme of the conference, is Literate India, Building a Knowledge Economy, which of course is the need of the hour today, and we all, I'm sure everybody agrees to that. Just to add a bit to that, or what I was thinking while I was driving up here, that I think over the years we have moved on from something that we call literacy. There is difference between being literate and being educated. You don't necessarily have to be literate to be educated. Many people say that. So while literacy is important, that's where the thing starts from, but I think the time has come where we have to move on to a much wider and a broader perspective, where academics, how to know to read and write, and the logical thinking and communication skills are important, but there are so many other things which are also important for you to sustain yourself in this kind of a world that that exists today and in which we live today. So education is what I think we must focus more on. Literacy is a part of education. If Vineet has spoken about the higher education, I would like to bring a little perspective on K-12 education here. Vineet has spoken about the quantitative to qualitative kind of needs, which I'm sure everybody agrees. It's not as much of hardware, but it's more about software that we should be concerned about today. Unfortunately, our entire education system at the government level, and of course maybe that was the need of that time when we were building from scratch, but it has continued to remain more input focused than outcome related. We don't really evaluate what the outcomes we are generating, and that's where we have to move on. If you talk about K-12 education basically, it has to produce, as I think, 4 different categories of individuals to work in working life. At the top level, we talk about producing thinkers and leaders who guide us. Then comes the category of what we say the technocrats and entrepreneurs. And then comes the total working population, where again we can divide them into 2. One is what we call the office workers, or as Amitji was talking about, how the service industry in India has grown a lot, so-called the white collar. But then at the same time, it's extremely important to have a very large base, which is the working population for our manufacturing sector, for construction sector, that also needs to be produced. So these are 4 broad sort of objectives, or 4 broad categories in which the students of today's classrooms have to be prepared, depending on their interest, depending on their acumen, depending on their ability, depending on what they want to do in life. And I'm sure in a country as large, we would have enough people who can qualify for each of these 4 categories. Amitji spoke about a bit that how from an agrarian economy, India has in a way skipped a bit of the manufacturing phase, and we have straight gone into the service economy. And if we see what our GDP constitutes today, the largest percentage is services, second is manufacturing, and the third is agriculture produce, what we talk about. At the same time, if we look at China had started with agrarian economy, but then they really worked up their manufacturing base, and they are the manufacturers for the world today. And they worked a lot over several decades to be able to build that model by mastering the skilling program to produce these kind of people. India, somehow we have missed that. We went to the second stage. So if we compare these 2 countries today, China has a need to move away from, or maybe to move beyond from manufacturing to services base or to a knowledge economy. When we say China is manufacturing today, but can any one of us think of a single automobile brand which is a Chinese brand? At least I don't know, which is world famous. They know how to manufacture, but on somebody else's design. They don't design things themselves, But that's something, incidentally last month in a delegation I was with a group of about 17 educationists from India, and we did a study tour of Chinese universities. And it was really an eye-opener to learn that how in the last 15 to 17 years, there was a very conscious effort and will and desire at the national level to uplift their higher education system to create a knowledge economy. And they have done very dramatic things, very unusual things. For example, merging 4 universities into one and creating a huge one. They have created a separate scholarship council which not only provides scholarships for Chinese students to get into Chinese universities, but provide scholarships for Chinese students to go and study in foreign universities, and 98% is the return rate. They don't stay in US or UK, they come back to China. They have provided that kind of an ecosystem, or providing scholarship to foreign students to come and study in China so that they distribute knowledge, likewise for teachers and faculty. Huge funding on research, which the government does, as much to government universities as much to private universities. So there's a full framework like any good corporation does, which China has done to uplift their higher education model. And I hope there are a lot of things that we have to learn in India, which we would, and probably go on that track. India, on the other side, we have, and we did in that delegation compare the standard at which Chinese universities are compared to where the Indian universities are today, and there's huge difference. India is here and China is here, but I don't see much time when China also will be able to raise there. So we'll have to keep growing up because China is catching very fast. But if we talk about the manufacturing skills and the workforce, if China is there, India is here. So that's one area where we have to work a lot and really, really develop with the kind of population that we deal with and with the kind of young population that we have. It's heartening that CBSE, for example, I think they have almost 50 or close to 50 skill-based programs which they are introducing in schools now. Amit ji spoke about the 12th plan document. The 12th plan document talks about setting up community colleges, which would be a college for students who don't want to pursue higher education in a formal system, or probably who are not very high academic achievers, but getting into colleges which are more skill-based to prepare them for a particular discipline. It's very hard to get people for any work today. So there is a conscious move happening towards that side, and we have two international models to look at when we talk about the skill space. One is the Western model, which happens in Germany and Switzerland, where after 12 years of schooling, the students don't necessarily go into higher education. Bulk of them majorly do something called a dual degree, where they work in an industry, attain skills, and 2 days or 3 days in a week go to a classroom as well to learn the theory around the skills that they are developing. And this entire system, what happens, gives them a certification which is nationally recognized and is equivalent to a bachelor's degree. So while they are doing something, they're not just attaining theory, but also learning the practical skills. And post that, the students who want to pursue higher education, they get into university for a master's program. So that's one model that India is looking at, and community colleges, what the government is thinking about, is somewhat on those lines. Then there is another model. We talk about Ethiopia, a country in Africa. Now, Ethiopia as a country has never been colonialized ever. I think about 15, 20 years back, they realized, and they had a similar kind of a demographic distribution as we have currently in India. The crime rate was high, the GDP was very less, they had very, very less number of people who were able to come forward in the workforce. So they started something called a skilling program, which started after year 8 or grade 8 in schooling system. And the fruits that they have been able to derive from this entire initiative over the years are tremendous. If we see, it's growing, year on year the GDP is growing, and they attribute much of this success to what they did on the skilling space for kids after grade 8. The crime rate has come down. The country is one of the prominent countries in Africa today. So that's what they are doing. So what I'm saying is there are two models in the world for us to look at, and India has scope for both to do. But skilling is a very, very large space where things have to happen. This conference that we talk about is edu entrepreneurship. So where are the next models of edu entrepreneurship, coming from, or what would they be? Would they continue to be the traditional things of setting up schools, something like we did, or setting up universities as Vineet has done, or publishing as what Amit ji is doing? Or will it be a little different? I personally feel that there will continue to be a scope for what we have been doing, but it will keep getting smaller and smaller because there are enough people there. But new opportunities are going to emerge, and they are going to emerge in a very, very massive way. So I personally think that this is now we are going to enter into an era of collaboration. And when I say an era of collaboration, this is collaboration between the private enterprises and the government. Now, how can this collaboration happen? Is there an opportunity? Is there an ecosystem that exists for this collaboration to happen? What are the areas in which these collaborations can happen? If we talk about school education and higher education, school education in this country, generally everybody would believe that the private sector has been able to build some credibility. So even a government servant, even the employees who work for us, or even the people lower down in the strata of the society, they aspire to send their kids to private schools as against government schools. Unfortunately, the same kind of credibility so far hasn't been able to be created at the higher education space, where our state system continues to be at the top rank. But over the last 5, 7 years, 8 years, the kind of brilliant initiatives that are coming up, and one such example is right here in terms of Ashoka University, which is coming up. I'm sure that thing also is going to change in very, very short time. What will these things do? These things probably will gradually try to bridge the gap of trust deficit, what the government has always maintained in this country for our socialistic, kind of a framework on the private sector. And as we say, as one of the advertisement in the television say that hawa badal rahi hai, and probably the hawa has already changed now. With the new mindset in the new government, things are going to change, and I think more and more invitation will happen for the private sector. So what are these areas in which private sector can work and create businesses? Let's look at the kind of education infrastructure that exists around us in the whole country. In the urban cities, in the rural cities, you go into any remote interiors of any state, in some villages which hardly have small population, the only building which you see well painted and all is a school in that particular locality. So it's not that the physical infrastructure doesn't exist. It does. But is it occupied? Is it being used? Is it utilized? There are huge gaps in that area. Does the government have wherewithal to probably come up with the utilization of these infrastructure? Government has been trying for several years. The answer is no. So these are the areas where the new models of public-private partnership models are going to emerge, and that's what we at chamber levels, Amit ji, Sharad ji, Vineet, and all of us, we together try and work with the government of trying to promote that bit, that okay, you have created an infrastructure, you have already invested a lot of money, you come out with schemes for setting up new schools on public-private partnership, but what about the existing infrastructure? Why not we put that into more use? There are schools in South Delhi with capacity of 1,500. The municipal schools, only about 300, 350 students study there. And these schools are sitting on some very, very prime real estate, accessible to everybody. And every year when the nursery admissions happen, it's a nightmare for all the parents. So these are areas where the collaborations will emerge and more models will come up. Another space in which we are talking to the government is one of the biggest resource constraint in setting up our educational infrastructure is land. Where do we get that land? Is it available at affordable prices? Is it available at locations which are approachable to where the communities live? You can't just keep going outside and setting up universities and schools outside the cities, because where would the students come from? Where would the faculty come from? On the other side, if we look at, say, for example, great institutions which are sitting in our country, JNU, which is right in the heart of New Delhi. It's sitting with about 850-acre campus, teaching about 6,000 students. Talk about University of Hyderabad. 1,011, 1,100 or 1,200 acre campus in the heart of the city, teaching to much lesser than 10,000 students. And compare these campuses with the sizes of universities anywhere in the West, or I would say even in China, the number of students studying in these universities are very high. So this is the second opportunity where there are already models which have worked and worked successfully in countries like Australia and other places where private investment has come on public land, and institutions have been created and things have happened. So that's a second area where probably, the collaboration can happen. So we'll have to now think a little differently of how the educational entrepreneurship can grow, and there are enough opportunities. We have to just get the right ideas, get the government to work for us, and there is clearly a mindset for the government to work on these lines. I'm an optimistic person. I think positively, so I think definitely there's a room for all of us to grow. And I think the next decade or so is going to be a golden era for upliftment of education, an area which has been so well, so worstly neglected over the last several years in the Indian history. So with that, I conclude my talk. I think I spent close to about 13 minutes, so I overshot, I think, by about 3 minutes, but hope it was relevant. Thank you so very much.